Take a moment and really look at your palm, not just as skin and lines, but as a map, something that has been quietly with you your entire life, waiting to be understood. If you notice a clear letter M, or perhaps a soft crescent moon shape resting at the center, I want you to pause, because this moment, right here, may not be as random as it seems. From a psychological and spiritual perspective, the human mind is deeply attuned to patterns, especially the ones that resonate with something we've always felt but could never quite explain. That subtle pull you feel when you notice this mark, that quiet sense of recognition. It's not imagination, it's awareness beginning to surface. Many ancient traditions have long suggested that our hands carry more than physical lines. They reflect emotional imprints, intuitive tendencies, and even the deeper rhythms guiding our life path. Think about your own experiences, the instincts that appeared without logic, the moments of déjà vu that felt too real to ignore, the feeling of being slightly different, as though you were observing life from a deeper layer than those around you. These are not isolated events. They are patterns, signals that something within you has been trying to get your attention. And that symbol on your palm, it may simply be a physical reflection of that inner dialogue. If you've ever questioned why you feel the way you do, or sense that your life holds a deeper meaning waiting to be uncovered, then you are exactly where you need to be. Because today, we're not just exploring what this mark represents, we're stepping into how it connects to your awareness, your intuition, and the way you move through the world. More importantly, I'm going to guide you through simple, practical steps to help you engage with this awareness, to move from passive curiosity into active understanding. Each step in this video builds upon the last, creating a process that is not about blind belief, but about personal experience. So, stay with me until the end, because what may begin as a simple observation could unfold into a deeper understanding of yourself than you ever expected. So, before we go any further, don't skip a single moment of what comes next. Every detail matters more than you might realize. Now, let's begin. That letter M, or the crescent moon you see on your palm, is not merely a random formation of lines. It is, in many ways, a form of language, a quiet, symbolic message that has been with you, waiting to be noticed and understood. Some people are born with this mark, while for others, it seems to emerge more clearly over time, almost like a signal gradually revealing itself as they grow more aware of who they are. Across various spiritual traditions, including teachings found in Buddhism and other ancient philosophies, the hands are not seen as passive parts of the body. They are viewed as instruments of creation, healing, and transformation. Your hands shape your reality through action, intention, and energy. So when a distinct marking appears on your palm, it is often interpreted not as coincidence, but as an indication of a deeper purpose, something uniquely tied to the way you interact with the world around you. Here is a perspective that is rarely spoken aloud. If you carry this sign, you may be more sensitive to energy than you've been led to believe. Psychologically and energetically, you function almost like a conduit, a channel through which subtle emotional and environmental signals flow. You may have noticed that when you enter a room, something shifts. It could be the atmosphere, the emotional tone, or even the way people respond to your presence without fully understanding why. At times, you may have tried to dismiss this, to convince yourself that you are no different from anyone else. I may have attempted to rationalize these experiences, to fit them into familiar explanations. But beneath that effort, there is often a quiet knowing, an awareness that something about you operates on a slightly different frequency. And then, there are the moments that are harder to ignore. Repeating numbers appearing at just the right time, sudden flashes of déjà vu that feel too precise to be accidental. Encounters with strangers who look at you with an unusual sense of recognition, as though something in you feels familiar to them on a level beyond words. These experiences, when viewed through a deeper lens, are not random disruptions in reality. They are patterns. They are signals of alignment. They suggest that there is a connection forming between your inner awareness and the external world, a subtle synchronization that begins to occur when you are moving closer to understanding your own nature. And that mark on your palm, it may simply be one of the many ways this alignment is expressing itself, quietly, consistently, and patiently waiting for you to pay attention. Before we move forward, I want to pause and give you a chance to reflect. What part of this message stood out to you the most? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please take a moment to like this video and drop a comment below. You can share a specific sentence that resonated or simply type a phrase like, "I am ready." Your engagement doesn't just support the channel, it anchors these insights more deeply in your own life. Once you do that, we'll continue on this path together. At its core, all of this serves as a quiet but persistent reminder. It may finally be time to pay attention. Not in a fearful or overwhelming way, but with a sense of awareness, an openness to what you've been subtly experiencing all along. Because the real question is not whether these signs exist, but whether you will continue to dismiss them or begin to truly listen. In many spiritual and psychological frameworks, this moment is often described as a recognition of energy, a point where your awareness starts to align with sensations and patterns you may have previously overlooked. It is the realization that you perceive and respond to the world a little differently. Not better, not worse, just differently. And perhaps more intentionally. You may have already noticed small but meaningful clues. Animals, for instance, may seem unusually comfortable around you, approaching without hesitation or lingering in your presence. Young children, who are often more attuned to emotional authenticity, might look at you with a kind of quiet curiosity, as if they sense something familiar or calming. These reactions are rarely random. They are often responses to subtle cues, your energy, your presence, the way you exist in a space. But here is an important insight that many people overlook. Your body often perceives these signals before your conscious mind has the chance to interpret them. Long before you form a thought or reach a conclusion, your nervous system is already responding. You might notice a gentle tingling in your hands, a sense of warmth, or a faint, almost magnetic sensation between your palms. In various traditions, this is sometimes referred to as life force energy, the body's way of registering subtle internal and external stimuli. Rather than taking this as something abstract, let's ground it in a simple experience. Take a moment now and rub your palms together for a few seconds, just enough to create a bit of friction. Then slowly separate them, holding them a short distance apart. As you pause, bring your attention to the space between your hands. You may begin to feel warmth, a soft pressure, or a subtle pulsing sensation. What you are noticing is not imagined. It is your awareness tuning into physical and sensory feedback that is always present, but rarely observed with intention. This moment is less about discovering something new, and more about recognizing something that has always been there, waiting quietly for you to notice. And perhaps, that is where your understanding truly begins. What you just felt in your hands is not something imagined or coincidental. It is real, tangible, and deeply connected to the way your body and mind interact with the world. That subtle pulse, that warmth, that almost magnetic sensation between your palms, it is evidence, not in a dramatic or mystical sense, but in a quiet, experiential way. It shows you that your awareness can detect more than you may have previously allowed yourself to believe. This sensation is not just in your head. In fact, it is happening through your body, through your nervous system, your sensory perception, and your focused attention. And when you begin to observe it more closely, you may notice that it becomes clearer, more defined, and easier to recognize over time. What once felt vague starts to take on a more consistent presence. Now, when we return to that symbol on your palm, the letter M, or the crescent moon, you can begin to view it through a different lens. Rather than seeing it as a random marking, you might consider it as a kind of symbolic focal point. In many traditions, it is described as an antenna, not in a literal physical sense, but as a way of understanding how certain individuals are more attuned to subtle cues, patterns, and emotional signals in their environment. While others may move through life without noticing these nuances, you may find that you pick up on them more easily. What might feel like static to someone else, a vague impression, a fleeting feeling, can register more clearly for you. This is often experienced as intuition, those moments when you seem to know something without being able to logically explain how you know it. A decision that feels right before you analyze it, a sense of awareness that appears just before something unfolds. When you reflect on your past, you may begin to see that these moments were not isolated. They were part of a pattern, your mind and body attempting to communicate through signals you were not yet fully tuned into. The mark on your palm, in this sense, becomes less of a prediction and more of a confirmation, a reminder of a tendency that has always been present within you. you might begin to recognize that you process information differently, that your attention naturally gravitates towards subtle details, emotional shifts, and underlying patterns. This does not make you separate or superior, but it does suggest a different orientation toward experience, one that relies not only on logic, but also on perception and internal awareness. And this is where the real shift begins. Because once you acknowledge these signals, you are no longer passively experiencing them. You are actively engaging with them. What was once a faint impression can gradually become clearer, more reliable, and more integrated into the way you make decisions and understand the world around you. This moment, then, is not about sudden transformation, but about alignment, bringing your attention into sync with abilities and tendencies that have always been there. It is an invitation to stop dismissing these experiences as coincidence or imagination, and instead begin to observe them with curiosity and clarity. Not because you are being told to believe something, but because you are starting to notice it for yourself. So, rather than continuing to push these feelings aside or explain them away, this is your moment to begin listening, genuinely, consciously, and without hesitation. Because what you've been sensing is not random noise. It is information. It is awareness trying to rise to the surface. You may have spent a long time trying to fit into environments that never quite reflected who you are, or questioning why you perceive things more deeply than those around you. But what if that difference is not something to minimize, but something to understand? From a psychological and spiritual perspective, individuals who experience this heightened sensitivity are often those who are more attuned to patterns, emotions, and subtle shifts in their environment. In other words, you are not ordinary in the way you process the world, and that is not a flaw, and it is a capacity. When we use the word chosen, it does not imply exclusivity or superiority. Instead, it points to responsibility and awareness. It suggests that you are beginning to recognize something within yourself that has always been there, a potential that has not yet been fully expressed. And my role here is not to convince you of anything, but to help you bring that awareness into clarity, to help you activate what is already present within you. If this is your first time here, then consider this more than just an introduction. Think of it as a point of connection. You are here because something resonated, something aligned with your curiosity, your experience, or perhaps even a question you've been carrying for a long time. And in that sense, you are exactly where you need to be right now. This space is not simply about passive inspiration, it is about engagement. It is about understanding how your thoughts, your attention, and your internal dialogue shape the direction of your life. When we talk about activation, we are referring to the process of becoming aware of these patterns, and then learning how to work with them intentionally. It is, in many ways, a form of mental and emotional recalibration, shifting from unconscious reaction to conscious response. So, if you feel ready to explore that process, if you are open to understanding yourself in a deeper, more structured way, then I invite you to take an active role in this journey. Engage with the content, reflect on what resonates. If you find value here, you can support the channel by liking and subscribing, not as an obligation, but as a way of staying connected to ideas and discussions that encourage this kind of awareness. Because what comes next is not just information, it is a series of steps designed to help you observe, understand, and apply what you've been sensing all along. And if you stay with this process, you may find that the clarity you've been searching for has been much closer than you ever realized. By now, you've likely felt something, however subtle, in your hands. That warmth, that faint pulse, that quiet sense of energy moving between your palms. And you've also become aware of the mark itself, whether it's the letter M or the crescent moon. But awareness, on its own, is only the beginning. Simply knowing that something exists does not yet unlock its potential. The real transformation begins when you learn how to engage with it, when you move from passive recognition into active understanding. From both a psychological and spiritual perspective, this shift is essential. Human awareness becomes meaningful only when it is applied. The sensations you've experienced, the patterns you've noticed, and the questions that have brought you here, these are all signals pointing toward a deeper level of interaction with your own inner processes. What matters now is not just that you have noticed them, but what you choose to do with that awareness moving forward. What I'm about to share with you is not simply a collection of abstract ideas or vague concepts. Instead, these are structured practices, methods that have been explored, refined, and passed down across generations in different forms. While they are often described in spiritual language, they can also be understood as ways of directing attention, regulating the body, and strengthening the connection between your internal experience and your external actions. You can think of them as keys, not in a mystical sense, but as tools that help unlock patterns that already exist within you. Each practice is designed to help you become more attuned to your own signals, your intuition, your physical sensations, and your thought processes. Over time, this creates a stronger sense of clarity, allowing you to respond to situations with greater awareness rather than automatic reaction. There is also something important to recognize here. The power we are referring to is not something being given to you from the outside. It is already present. It exists in the way your mind processes information, in the sensitivity of your perception, and in the connection between your body and your awareness. These practices simply help you access it more consistently and more intentionally. So as we move forward, approach what comes next with curiosity rather than expectation. You are not being asked to believe anything blindly. Instead, you are being invited to observe, to experience, and to test these ideas for yourself. Because the real value does not come from hearing these concepts, it comes from applying them. And today, step by step, you are going to begin learning how. Step 1 begins with something deceptively simple, yet profoundly important. Learning to trust your body's instant truth. There are moments, brief, almost imperceptible, when you know something before you can logically explain it. A decision feels right or wrong in an instant, long before your mind has time to analyze it. This is what many people refer to as a gut feeling, an inner voice, or even a higher sense of guidance. From a psychological perspective, it is your brain processing patterns at a subconscious level. From a spiritual lens, it is often experienced as intuition. Either way, it communicates through the body first. You may have already felt it in different forms: a sudden warmth in your chest, a tightening in your breath, a chill running down your spine, or a subtle tingling and heaviness in your palms. These are not random sensations. They are signals. Your nervous system translating information into physical experience before conscious thought catches up. The challenge is that many people have been conditioned to ignore or override these signals, labeling them as anxiety, coincidence, or overthinking. From this moment forward, the practice is to begin trusting these responses with greater awareness, not blindly, but attentively. You don't always need extended time to decide what feels aligned or misaligned. Often, the first few seconds, those immediate bodily reactions, contain valuable information. You can think of it as a 7-second window, where your initial response reflects a deeper layer of processing that has not yet been filtered or rationalized. For example, if your breath suddenly shortens in a situation, or your palms feel cold or tense, instead of dismissing it, pause and observe. Ask yourself what your body might be responding to. This is not about assuming danger or reacting impulsively, but about acknowledging that your body is communicating something worth noticing. In many ancient traditions, this practice is described as mindful awareness, the ability to remain present with your internal experience and to recognize the intelligence already embedded within you. What makes this practice powerful is consistency. The more you pay attention to these signals, the more refined they become. It is similar to tuning a radio frequency. At first, the signal may feel unclear or inconsistent, but with focus and repetition, it becomes sharper and easier to recognize. Over time, what once felt like a faint, uncertain impression can develop into a steady and reliable sense of guidance. Eventually, this awareness begins to integrate into your daily life. You start to recognize patterns in how your body responds, and you learn to differentiate between signals that indicate alignment and those that suggest hesitation or discomfort. At that point, your intuition no longer feels like a distant or abstract concept. It becomes something grounded, something you can access and trust. And it is in this stage of understanding that the meaning of those markings on your hands begins to shift. They are no longer just visual symbols to interpret. Instead, they can be seen as reminders, anchors that point back to your ability to perceive, to feel, and to respond with awareness. In that sense, they represent not something external, but a reflection of a capacity that has always been within you, waiting to be recognized and now, gradually, being brought into clarity. If your hands can be understood as sensitive receivers, attuned to subtle signals within and around you, then the next step is learning how to clear and reset that signal. This brings us to step 2, cleansing. Not in the ordinary mechanical sense of simply washing your hands, but in a more intentional and focused way. A deliberate reset of your mental and emotional state. Each evening, take a few quiet moments at your sink. Let cool, steady water run over your hands. At first, it may feel like a simple, everyday action, but the shift begins with your awareness. Close your eyes and bring your full attention to the sensation, the temperature of the water, the movement across your skin, the rhythm of its flow. Instead of seeing it as just water, then allow yourself to experience it as a medium for release, a physical anchor for a psychological process. As the water moves over your hands, begin to imagine that it is carrying away the mental and emotional residue of your day. The doubts, the moments of hesitation, the quiet thoughts of "I can't" or "I'm not enough." Allow them to take form in your mind and then gently dissolve as the water flows downward. This is not about forcing yourself to believe something new, but about creating space by letting go of what is no longer helpful. And here is the key. You are not just observing this process, you are guiding it. With calm intention, you might say softly to yourself, "I release what no longer serves me." The words act as a signal, reinforcing the mental shift you are creating. They help your mind associate this moment with letting go, with clearing, with resetting. What makes this practice effective is the combination of physical sensation and mental imagery. In psychology and neuroscience, it is well established that the brain responds to vivid imagination in ways that are remarkably similar to real experience. When you pair the tactile feeling of water with a clear mental image of releasing tension, you are essentially giving your nervous system a structured cue to change state. Over time, this pairing becomes stronger, making it easier for your mind and body to enter a calmer, more focused condition. This is where the transformation begins, not through complexity, but through consistency. The act of washing your hands becomes more than a habit. It becomes a signal to your system that it is safe to let go of accumulated stress and return to a more balanced state. As you practice, try to make the imagery more vivid and personal. You might picture a dense gray cloud representing your doubts slowly thinning and disappearing, or feel a sense of weight lifting from your shoulders as the water flows. The exact image is less important than your engagement with it. What matters is that you are actively participating in the process, rather than going through it automatically. In this way, a simple nightly action becomes something far more meaningful. A moment of intentional reset. A point where you shift from carrying the day's weight into releasing it. Over time, this practice can begin to influence not only how you feel in that moment, but how you approach the next day, with greater clarity, steadiness, and a quieter mind. And that is the essence of this step. Not just cleansing your hands, but creating a space within yourself where something new can begin. If these markings on your hands can be understood as receivers, subtle points of awareness attuned to your inner and outer world, then the next step is learning how to clear the signal they are receiving. This brings us to step 2, cleansing. Not in the ordinary sense of simply washing your hands, but in a more intentional and focused way, a reset for your mental and emotional state. Each evening, take a moment to go to the sink and allow cool, steady water to run over your hands. At first, this may seem like a simple, almost routine action, but the shift happens in how you engage with it. Close your eyes, slow your breathing, and bring your full attention to the sensation of the water. Notice its temperature, its movement, the way it flows across your skin. Instead of treating it as just water, begin to frame it as a medium for release, a physical anchor for a mental process. As the water runs, imagine that it is carrying away the tension you've accumulated throughout the day. Not in a literal sense, but as a symbolic representation of letting go. Visualize the thoughts that have been weighing on you. Doubts, self-criticism, lingering stress, gradually dissolving and moving downward with the flow. You are not forcing anything. You are simply allowing your mind to organize and release what is no longer useful. This is where intention becomes important. Rather than passively observing, actively direct your focus. You might quietly say to yourself, in a calm and steady tone, "I release what no longer serves me." The words themselves are simple, but their purpose is to reinforce the mental shift you are creating. They act as a cue for your brain to associate this moment with letting go and resetting. What makes this practice effective is not the physical action alone, but the combination of sensory input and mental imagery. Research in psychology and neuroscience has shown that when you vividly imagine an experience, many of the same neural pathways are activated as when you physically go through it. In other words, the brain responds to well-directed imagery as if it were real. When you pair the sensation of running water with the visualization of releasing tension, you are essentially giving your nervous system a structured signal to relax and reset. Over time, this repetition begins to condition your mind. The act of washing your hands becomes associated with a shift in state, from tension to clarity, from mental noise to a more grounded awareness. You are, in a practical sense, training your brain to let go more efficiently. As you continue this practice, try to make the imagery as clear as possible. You might picture a dense gray cloud representing your stress gradually thinning and disappearing, or a sense of weight being lifted from your shoulders as the water flows. The specific image matters less than the consistency of the process. What is important is that you engage both your senses and your attention. In this way, what appears to be a simple habit becomes something more structured and meaningful, a deliberate pause in your day where you reset your internal state, not through force, but through awareness and repetition. And over time, this small practice can begin to influence how you carry yourself into the next moment, so with a little more clarity and a little less of what no longer needs to stay. Now we arrive at the third step, perhaps the most transformative of all, claiming your truth. This is the point where awareness becomes intention, and intention begins to shape reality. Up until now, you have observed, felt, and cleared. But here, you begin to direct. You begin to use your voice, not just as a tool for expression, but as a mechanism for internal change. You might wonder what affirmations have to do with the markings on your palm. From a symbolic perspective, these marks can be understood as points of sensitivity, areas that represent heightened awareness and intuitive processing. If we think of them as receivers, then affirmations become the signal you consciously send through your system. They are structured thoughts, spoken with intention, that help guide your attention, your emotional state, and ultimately your behavior. Both traditional practices and modern neuroscience offer insight into this process. In palmistry, such markings are often associated with amplified intuitive tendencies. In psychology, repeated verbal statements, when paired with attention and emotion, can influence neural pathways through a process known as neuroplasticity. In simple terms, the brain adapts to what it repeatedly experiences. When you consistently pair words with focused attention and emotional engagement, those patterns begin to strengthen internally. But there is an important distinction to make. Affirmations are not effective when spoken mechanically. Their impact depends on how deeply they are experienced. It is not just about saying the words, it is about embodying them. This is where practice becomes essential. Begin by finding a quiet space where you can focus without interruption. Sit or stand comfortably, and place your palms, especially the areas where you notice the markings, over your chest. Bring your attention to your breathing. Inhale slowly through your nose for about 7 seconds, allowing your breath to deepen naturally. As you inhale, imagine that you are drawing in clarity and steadiness. Hold that breath gently for a few seconds. Then exhale slowly through your mouth, releasing tension and mental noise. Repeat this cycle several times, allowing your body to settle into a more regulated state. This breathing pattern serves a practical purpose. It helps shift your nervous system into a calmer, more receptive mode. When your body is in this state, it becomes easier for your mind to focus and for new patterns to take hold. Once you feel more centered, begin introducing your affirmations. Speak them slowly and clearly, paying attention to how they feel as you say them. For example, my actions are guided by clarity. I trust my perception and respond with awareness. I am capable of moving forward with confidence. As you speak, allow your attention to rest on the sensations in your body, particularly in your hands and chest. You might notice subtle changes, a sense of warmth, steadiness, or focus. These are signs that your attention and your physical state are beginning to align. If it helps, you can visualize the lines on your palms as points of focus, areas where your attention gathers as you speak. This is not about imagining something unrealistic, but about giving your mind a clear reference point to stay engaged. The goal is to create a connection between your words, your attention, and your physical awareness. After repeating your chosen statements, take a moment to pause. Let the words settle. You might gently bring your hands together or simply rest them in your lap, signaling the end of the practice. This closing moment is important. It helps your mind recognize that a shift has occurred, however small. Over time, this process becomes more natural. The words you choose begin to influence how you think, how you interpret situations, and how you respond. What starts as a deliberate practice gradually integrates into your daily behavior. In this sense, you are not creating something entirely new. You are reinforcing patterns that support clarity, confidence, and awareness. The markings on your hands, then, all become less about prediction and more about focus, reminders of your capacity to direct your attention and shape your internal experience. And that is where the real change begins. This is your moment, whether you fully realize it yet or not. The markings on your hands were never simply random lines or accidental patterns. They can be understood as symbols, representations of tendencies, sensitivities, and ways of perceiving that have been part of you long before you ever began to question them. In many traditions, such markings are described as a kind of map or key, not something that determines your future, but something that reflects the way you are naturally oriented toward it. If you take a moment to reflect, you may recognize a familiar feeling that has followed you for much of your life, a quiet sense of being slightly out of sync with what is considered normal, not in a negative way, but in a way that is difficult to fully explain. Perhaps you've often felt more aware of subtle emotional shifts, all more reflective than those around you, or more drawn to questions that others tend to overlook. It can feel as though something within you has been waiting patiently for the right moment to become clearer. From a psychological perspective, this does not mean you are separate from others, but it may suggest that you process experiences with a different level of depth or sensitivity. The markings you see on your hands, then, can serve as reminders of that orientation. They are not random in the sense that they reflect patterns, both physical and behavioral, that have developed over time. When people describe this as being chosen, it can be more helpful to interpret it as becoming aware of how you think, how you feel, and how you respond to the world. Because individuals who develop this awareness often do not simply encounter change by chance. They recognize it, engage with it, and gradually shape it through their actions. You may begin to notice certain recurring experiences, moments where you feel a pull in your chest when something matters deeply, or a subtle tension or warmth in your hands when you are trying to decide or understand something. These are not necessarily signs of something external guiding you, but they are signals, your body and mind communicating in ways that become clearer when you pay attention. And this is where a shift can occur. Instead of waiting for clear instructions or obvious answers, you begin to work with what you already experience. You notice patterns. You respond more intentionally. You stop dismissing the impressions that arise within you and instead examine them with curiosity and awareness. Over time, this changes how you move through life. You are no longer reacting automatically or waiting for direction from outside sources. You begin to rely more on your own perception, on the way you interpret situations, the way you read subtle cues, and the way you make decisions based on both thought and internal awareness. In that sense, this is not the beginning of something entirely new. It is more like a return to patterns, sensitivities, and ways of understanding that have always been present, but perhaps not fully recognized. And now, gradually, they are coming into focus. There is a powerful principle recognized in both psychology and spiritual traditions. Clarity responds to decisive action. When you make a clear, intentional choice, no matter how small, you begin to shift your internal state. Your mind moves from hesitation into alignment, from passive observation into active participation. And that shift, subtle as it may seem, is often where transformation truly begins. So instead of letting this moment pass by as just another video, I invite you to engage with it, intentionally. If this message has resonated with you, take a simple action right now. Press the like button, and if you can, do it with the hand where you've noticed the mark on your palm, not because the action itself is magical, but because you are assigning meaning to it. You are turning it into a conscious signal, a personal yes to stepping into greater awareness and possibility. Then, take it one step further. Go into the comments and write the number 555. In many spiritual frameworks, this number is associated with change, transition, and alignment. But beyond symbolism, what matters most is the act itself. By writing it, you are marking a moment. You are choosing to acknowledge that something within you is ready to shift, to evolve, to move forward. From a psychological perspective, these small, deliberate actions create commitment. They anchor intention into behavior. And when you act with intention, your mind begins to follow. You become more aware of patterns, more receptive to opportunities, and more attuned to the subtle connections happening around you. What some may describe as synchronicity often begins with this heightened awareness, when you start noticing what was always there, but previously overlooked. Think of this as a turning point, however small, a moment where you decide not to ignore what you've felt, but to acknowledge it, not dramatically, but consciously. So, let me ask you directly, will you take that step, however simple it may seem? Will you leave your mark in the comments as a sign that you are present, aware, and willing to engage? Or will this moment pass without interaction, becoming just another piece of content you move on from? There is no pressure in the decision, but there is meaning in the choice. Because real change rarely begins with something grand. It begins with a single, intentional act. And this could be yours. If you are still with me, I want you to pause and truly acknowledge this moment. You didn't just stumble upon this video by chance. You're here because something inside you is stirring, a longing for clarity, a desire for change, or a quiet knowing that there is more waiting for you. The universe, in its subtle wisdom, often places the right tools in front of us at the exact right time. And today, that tool is your awareness. This journey is just beginning, and every video on this channel is another key unlocking a new dimension of your inner power. You are not here by accident, and you are not here to stay small. You have a unique light inside you, one that, once you claim it, will guide you toward the life you've always known was possible. So, I invite you to take this step. Hit that subscribe button and become part of this growing community. And if something in this video spoke to you, leave a comment with a specific quote that resonated, something that anchored in your heart. By sharing, you connect not only with your own growth, but with others who are on this path. Like, share, and stay with me, because the next video will take you even deeper. You won't want to miss what's coming next, because this is where your transformation truly begins. Until then, remember, your new life starts now.